It's 1963, and Britain's motorways are expanding faster than ever before. Harold Macmillan is Prime Minister, the Beatles are about to change music forever, and British families are trading in their Austin A35S, and Morris miners for something new, something modern. Into this world arrives a compact saloon that GM's Vauxhall division believed would revolutionize the British car market, the Viva HA. Now, you might be wondering why we're talking about a British economy car on a channel usually devoted to American classics. Here's the thing, the Viva wasn't just another small car. It represented General Motors' global ambitions during an era when Detroit was still king. This was the same corporation building Corvettes and Impalas, yet they poured serious engineering resources into this compact British saloon. The Viva became Britain's third best-selling car by 1965, and over its various generations, it sold more than 2 million units worldwide. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating for those of us who remember the 60s and 70s. The Viva was locked in a brutal battle with Ford's Escort and Cortina, BMC's Mini and 1000, 100, and later the Hillman Avenger. It was a dogfight that defined an entire generation of British motoring. Some of you might have owned one, worked on one, or at least remember your neighbor's Viva rusting away in their driveway by the mid-70s. The Viva's story is one of impressive engineering, commercial success, and ultimately the kind of rust problems that became legendary. So let's dig into 13 facts about this forgotten rival that nearly beat Ford at their own game. Fact 1. The Viva was born from GM's global small car strategy. In the early 1960s, General Motors recognized that the future wasn't just about big American V8s. European markets were booming, but they demanded smaller, more efficient vehicles. GM's Vauxhall division in Luton, England, had been building larger cars like the Cresta and Victor, but they needed something to compete in the growing compact segment. The Viva HA, introduced in 1963, was engineered specifically to undercut Ford's Anglia and later the Cortina. Vauxhall's parent company invested heavily in new tooling and production facilities. The name Viva itself was chosen to sound international, energetic and modern, appealing to younger buyers who wanted to break away from their parents' stodgy pre-war designs. What's remarkable is how GM applied American production techniques to a small British car. The Viva used unitary construction, but with simplified assembly processes that allowed Vauxhall to build them quickly and cheaply. The initial launch price was £528, incredibly competitive for 1963. Fact 2. The original HA model was genuinely innovative. When the Viva HA debuted, it brought several features that were unusual for an economy car of that era. The overhead valve engine was a 54 cubic inch inline-4 producing 44 horsepower, not impressive by American standards, but remember, this was a car weighing just 1,500 pounds. The suspension used coil springs all around at a time when many British economy cars still relied on leaf springs at the rear. The rack and pinion steering was direct and responsive, something you'd appreciate if you'd spent time wrestling with the vague steering boxes common in that era. Vauxhall offered the Viva with a choice of 2-door or 4-door saloon bodies, plus an estate variant called the Viva Van for commercial use. According to contemporary road tests in Motor magazine, the Viva could reach 73 miles per hour and return 35 to 40 miles per gallon in mixed driving, excellent figures for the time. Fact 3. The Viva outsold many more famous British cars. Here's where the numbers get interesting. In its first full year of production, 1964, Vauxhall built over 150,000 Viva HAs. By the time the HA generation ended in 1966, total production exceeded 310,000 units. To put that in perspective, that's more than many cars we remember more fondly today. The Viva was outselling the Triumph Herald, the Sunbeam Rapier, and even gave BMC's popular Austin Cambridge serious competition. Only the Mini, the Austin, Morris 1100, and Ford's Cortina consistently beat it in the sales charts. The British motoring press took notice. Autocar magazine called it a revelation in small car value, while Motor praised its surprising refinement for the class. These weren't paid advertisements, these were genuine assessments from journalists who tested dozens of cars every year. Fact 4. The HB generation brought serious performance options. When Vauxhall introduced the Viva HB in 1966, they took the formula upmarket. The new car was larger, more refined, and crucially, available with bigger engines. The base engine grew to 61 cubic inches, producing 57 horsepower. But the real story was the optional 90 cubic inch engine producing 90 horsepower. This larger engine transformed the Viva into something genuinely quick for its time. Motor Magazine tested a 90 cubic inch HB and recorded a top speed of 92 miles per hour with 0 to 60 acceleration in 14.2 seconds. Those numbers might not sound impressive today, but in 1967, that made it one of the quickest small saloons you could buy. Vauxhall even created a homologation special called the Viva GT. With its twin-carb engine, this little saloon could embarrass much more expensive sports cars on a winding B road. Production numbers for the GT were limited to around 2,000 units, making it quite collectible today among British classic car enthusiasts. Fact 5. Rally success nobody remembers. Here's something that might surprise you. The Vauxhall Viva was a legitimate rally competitor. In the hands of drivers like Tony Fall and Arthur Birchall, specially prepared Vivas competed in events throughout the late 1960s and early 70s. The Viva never achieved the legendary status of the Mini Cooper S or Ford Escort twin cam in rallying, but it punched well above its weight. These rally Vivas used highly modified versions of the 90 cubic inch engine, producing up to 130 horsepower, nearly 50% more than the standard GT model. According to period rally results, Vivas secured class wins in events like the RAC Rally and the Circuit of Ireland. The car's lightweight and surprisingly robust suspension made it competitive on loose surfaces, though its lack of power compared to the Escorts ultimately limited its success at the highest levels. Fact 6. The HC was where things got complicated. The third-generation Viva HC, launched in 1970, represented Vauxhall's most ambitious version yet. It was larger again, more stylish with its Coke bottle styling, and available with an even wider range of engines, from a 73 cubic inch base engine all the way up to a 122 cubic inch unit, producing 75 horsepower. But here's where Vauxhall made a critical mistake. In trying to cover every segment of the market, they created too many variants. You could get the HC as a 2-door, 4-door, estate, or even as a panel van. There were at least 6 different engine options, multiple trim levels, and various transmission choices. This complexity made the HC expensive to produce and maintain. According to company records, the HC never achieved the profit margins Vauxhall had projected. Production costs spiraled while Ford kept things simpler with the Escort, allowing them to undercut Vauxhall on price while maintaining better margins. Fact 7. The rust problem became legendary. Now we come to the elephant in the room, rust. If you owned a Viva in the 1970s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These cars dissolved faster than sugar in tea. The problem stemmed from poor rust protection combined with Britain's damp climate and the widespread use of road salt in winter. The sills would go first, then the wheel arches, then the floor pans. By the late 70s, it was common to see Vivas with holes you could fit your fist through. Consumer Reports and similar publications began documenting the Viva's rust issues by the mid-70s. Some independent surveys suggested that the average Viva had significant rust problems by just 4 or 5 years of age. This was worse than the contemporary Fords, which themselves weren't exactly rust-proof. The irony is that the mechanical components were generally reliable. You'd often find Vivas with perfectly good engines and transmissions being scrapped because the body had rotted away around them. Fact 8. Production numbers tell a story of decline. Let's look at the numbers across all 3 generations. The HA produced approximately 310,000 units over 3 years. The HB managed roughly 640,000 units over 4 years, a significant increase that showed growing market acceptance. But the HC, despite being in production for 9 years until 1979, only managed around 640,000 units total. That's barely more than the HB in twice the production span. The sales trajectory was clearly downward, especially in the later years. By 1977 and 1978, Viva sales had collapsed to around 40,000 units annually. The combination of quality issues, particularly rust, and stronger competition from improved Fords and the new generation of European imports had severely damaged the Viva's reputation. Fact 9. The Chevrolet connection most people don't know. Here's something for the GM enthusiasts among you. The Viva's engines and major components were shared across multiple GM divisions worldwide. That 90 cubic inch engine in the Viva GT, it was part of the same engine family used in the Opel Kadett in Germany and even found its way into some Australian Holdens. GM was practicing global platform sharing decades before it became standard industry practice. Components from Vauxhall's parts bin could be found in Opels, Chevrolets, and Holdens. This made economic sense for GM, but sometimes created odd situations where British buyers were essentially driving rebadged German or American designs. The Viva's platform engineering influenced the Chevrolet Chevette, which was sold in the United States from 1975 onwards. While not identical, the Chevette shared much of its basic architecture with Vauxhall's designs, proving that the Viva's engineering had merit even if its execution was sometimes lacking. FACT 10. Performance versions command surprising money today. Despite the Viva's generally poor reputation, certain versions have become genuinely collectible. A nice Viva GT in good condition can fetch £8,000 to £12,000 in the UK today. That's real money for what was once considered a disposable economy car. The rarity factor drives these values. Because so many Vivas rusted away, survivors are increasingly scarce. The GT models, produced in limited numbers and often driven hard, are particularly rare. Finding one that hasn't been modified or hasn't succumbed to rust is like finding hen's teeth. Restored examples occasionally appear at British classic car auctions, and they often exceed their estimates. There's a growing appreciation for these cars among collectors who remember them from their youth and want to recapture that experience. Fact 11. The Viva shaped GM's future small car strategy. The lessons learned from the Viva directly influenced GM's next-generation small cars. The Chevette, which replaced the Viva in 1975, incorporated improved rust protection and simplified the model range, both direct responses to the Viva's weaknesses. GM also learned about the importance of quality control and rust prevention. The Chevette still wasn't perfect in these areas, but it was noticeably better than the HC Viva. This gradual improvement continued through the 1980s, with models like the Astra. Industry analysts at the time noted that GM's experience with the Viva taught them that competing on price alone wasn't sufficient. Build quality, durability, and perceived value mattered increasingly to buyers, who were becoming more sophisticated and demanding. Fact 12. The Viva lives on in unexpected places. Long after production ceased in Britain, the Viva continued in other markets. In Kenya, for example, locally assembled Vivas remained in production well into the 1980s. The simpler HA and HB models were particularly popular in African markets, where their mechanical simplicity and parts availability made them practical choices. Similarly, in some South American markets, Viva production continued under different names and badges. The basic design was sound enough that it remained viable in markets where modern emissions regulations and safety standards weren't yet required. Today, you'll still occasionally spot Vivas being used as daily transport in countries like Kenya and India. These survivors are testament to the fundamental engineering quality of the design, even if the execution in British market cars left much to be desired. Fact 13. The Viva could have been great. This is perhaps the most frustrating fact of all. The Viva had the fundamental ingredients to be a truly great car. The basic engineering was sound, the styling was attractive for its era, and when everything worked properly, it was a pleasant, economical car to drive. The problem was execution, specifically the lack of proper rust protection and the overcomplication of the model range in the HC generation. Had Vauxhall invested properly in rust prevention and kept the range simpler, the Viva might have achieved the kind of legendary status that the Ford Escort enjoys today. Contemporary engineers who worked on the Viva have admitted in interviews that they knew about the rust issues but were constrained by budget pressures. The few extra pounds per car needed for better rust protection seemed unjustifiable to accountants at the time, but ultimately it destroyed the Viva's reputation and cost GM dearly in lost sales and warranty claims. The Vauxhall Viva represents one of British motoring's great what-ifs. It sold over 1,500,000 units across its 3 generations, competed successfully in rallying, and introduced thousands of British families to reliable, economical motoring. Yet today, it's largely forgotten, overshadowed by more successful rivals, and remembered primarily for its tendency to rust. For those of us who lived through that era, the Viva is more than just another old car. It represents a specific moment in British industrial history when domestic manufacturers were struggling to compete with better organized, better funded foreign rivals. The Viva's story is ultimately one of missed opportunities and cautionary lessons about the importance of quality control. If you owned a Viva, worked on one, or have memories of these cars from the 60s and 70s, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Did your Viva rust as badly as its reputation suggests? Did you have one of the rare GT models? Share your experiences with our community. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a forgotten classic, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're dedicated to telling the stories of cars that shaped motoring history, even when they didn't quite achieve the success they deserved. And if you found this video informative, give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching, and remember, every classic car has a story worth telling, even the ones that rusted away before their time.